What up, family? Tyrone Gregory here, your favorite uncle cousin, back at you again. And don't worry, if you are not family, you will be as soon as you hit that submit button. But let's get to today's video, man. I'm super excited to be back here recording once again to talk about today's video, which is something I believe needs to be talked about, is something I believe that needs to be put into mind, especially for people who are just beginning, because I've mentioned it before in videos that I've done about starting businesses. It's something that I've talked about in the comments. I've seen other people mention in the comment, but then I've also seen people ask what it is. So today's video is all about the DBA, what it is, and how to form one. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to the topic of today, the DBA. Get one. That was supposed to be like my EA Sports type thing. Anyway, let's go ahead. So beginning with the first question, what is a DBA exactly? Great question. I'm glad you asked it, because a DBA simply stands for doing business as, okay? DBA is short for doing business as. And depending on where you are in America, it could have a different name. Again, depending on where you are in these beautiful 50 states, it could be called a trade name. It can be called a fictitious business name, or it can be considered or called an assumed name. But regardless of where you are in these wonderful 50 states of America, it is always going to be the operating name of the business, okay? Just note, again, it is the operating name of the business and not the legal name. And I know you may be trying to figure out, well, what's the difference between the two? But stick with me as we get to this video. You will soon understand what I mean by that. But let me just give you a few fun examples of DBAs, because DBAs are all around us, and we have been dealing with DBAs all our life. And in these few short, fun examples, I'm just going to kind of give you an idea of what I mean when I say a DBA or a trade name or assumed name or something like that. Starting with the first one. We all know who this guy is, and if you don't, shame on you. This is Bruce Wayne. And we know Bruce Wayne is doing business as, you guessed it, Batman. All right. Another example, this guy right here, America's favorite, Mr. Clark Kent himself. Guess who he's doing business as? You guessed it, Superman. And even this lovely lady right here, the Princess Diana. Well, she's doing business as Wonder Woman. And how about this guy, the billionaire boy toy, Tony Stark himself, who is doing business as Iron Man. And we can't leave out our new hero guy, right? King T'Challa. Well, you know who he's doing business as, the Black Panther. Taxes forever. And even this guy right here, that's right, your favorite uncle cousin is doing business as the self-employed tax guy. Yes, my company is a DBA. It is not an LLC. It is not a C-Corp or any kind of entity as of the recording of this video. If it makes sense for me to make that change, then I'll do so. But as of right now, this is a DBA, and I am operating as a DBA confidently, okay? So let's go ahead and tell you why I love DBAs just that much. So before we get into all the beautiful things of a DBA, let's first understand the purpose, right? So what is the purpose of a DBA? Well, in your favorite uncle cousin's perspective, the purpose of a DBA is to give sole proprietors an inexpensive way to legally start and operate their businesses without having to form an entire entity like an LLC, S-Corp, or something similar. Again, just a very inexpensive way to legally start and operate your business. Because in my experience, forming a DBA allows you to start and test your business without having to spend tons of money. Again, by forming a DBA or fictitious name, trade name, assumed name, it allows you to legally operate your business within your local market. And that's important, understanding that it allows you to operate in your local market. And I promise you, we'll get to that later in the video, but that's the reason why I love the DBAs. You can test things out without spending a ton of money, and it allows you to legally operate your business in your local market while testing things out. But wait a minute, hold on. Before you get too excited, before you go run out and start filling out paperwork and getting DBAs and doing all these applications, I do want you to understand something. I want to make sure that there is no confusion, no misunderstanding, and your uncle, cousin do not want to mislead you in no kind of way. Yes, DBAs are a beautiful way to get things started, to test things out, but I do want you to understand that there's just certain things that you absolutely cannot do, and certain things you absolutely just positively will not be able to do with a DBA. So before we go on, let's get to this one here, because I want you to understand what you cannot do with the DBA. Okay, so yes, before we get into all of the creative things that we can do with a DBA, I do want you to focus in and understand the things that you cannot do. Beginning with this first one, you cannot protect your assets. Understand me when I tell you this. Having a DBA, a fictitious business name, assumed name, trade name, whatever, provides zero asset protection. Zilch. None, nada. And let me kind of give you an example of what I mean by this. In the previous example, we talked about how Bruce Wayne is Batman. Well, think about this. What if the Joker all of a sudden got the upper hand on Batman and he just finished him off? Would Bruce Wayne still exist? No. If Batman dies, Bruce Wayne dies, because they are one and the same. And vice versa. If Bruce Wayne dies, then guess what? So does Batman, because they are one and the same. There is no separation of entities. There is no separation of anything. There's no separation of liability. So if anything happens to your DBA, it is going to happen to you. So if something happens and someone comes after you and you get in litigation and lawsuit and the creditor wins, then they're going to come after your personal assets. There is no separation. So do understand, with a DBA, there is zero asset protection. Okay. Next thing to understand is that you cannot cross the line. Earlier, I mentioned that DBAs were only good for your local area or your local jurisdiction. And what I mean by that, or let me explain crossing the line, is that when you form a DBA, it is only good for that county, for that city, for that jurisdiction that you formed it in. It is not going to cover the entire state that you're in. It is not going to cover all the United States, all 50 states. It is really going to give you legal permission to physically, and that's the key word here, physically operate only within that jurisdiction. Now, the only exception to that is if you register that DBA online, so you have a name, you chose it, and you go online and you pick a domain name or a URL. It's once you have that name, no one else in the world can register that domain name, right? That is the only thing about that right now. However, there are many domain extensions. You got .com, .co, .biz, .info. There's so many of them. So unless you got enough money to register your DBA with all those extensions, then, you somebody else may be able to get that there. But the key thing here is DBAs allow you to operate within that jurisdiction physically. Okay. And what I mean by physically is, like, for example, I'm operating here in Los Angeles County, physically here in Los Angeles County, but I still can help someone in New York, right? Via online or whatever, right? Because, I'm physically here. Now, if I wanted to physically go to New York and set up a shop there, then I would have to register my business within the bureau or within one of the boroughs of New York or within any jurisdiction. So physical is the key. You cannot physically go set up another shop in another county without registering your DBA in that county, okay? So you cannot cross the line in jurisdictions when you have a DBA. Another thing you cannot do is protect your name, okay? A DBA, fictitious name, trade name, assumed name, is not going to give you that brand protection. Think about it. The DBA, as I stated earlier, is something for you to test things out. You're testing your brand. You're testing your product and services. So the moment that you see that this brand is starting really to become just that, a brand, something that you want to protect, then you may want to consider looking into a trademark or a copyright. If you're unfamiliar with that, you can go to the USPTO.gov, which is the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and they have a lot of resources and information just to give you a general idea of what it takes to do that. Because a DBA, again, is only going to protect you in that little jurisdiction, in that area that you're in. Someone can literally go right to the neighboring jurisdiction and register that same DBA name. For example, here in Los Angeles County is big. By me registering in LA County, I can operate in LA County, but someone can take this name or any name and go to Orange County and register the same exact name and physically set up shop and work in Orange County. Okay. You cannot protect the name. So if this is something that you think you're going to need protecting, then consider registering at a state level, which means you have to form an entity at that point, or going into a trademark or copyright and get the name protected, okay? So that is definitely something you cannot do, is protect your name. But also keep in mind, even by forming an LLC or a C-Corp alone, those two things alone, just by forming an LLC or a C-Corp also does not protect your name. It only gives you statewide protection as opposed to local protection. So something to keep in mind as well. So another thing you cannot do is be deceitful. And what I mean by that is your DBA name cannot contain any endings that would make it appear if it was an actual legal separate entity. Like it cannot say LLC at the end. It cannot say INC at the end or ESQ or something that would give the illusion as if it were an actual legal state form entity. So you cannot be deceitful with your DBA. Okay. So lastly, another thing you cannot do with your DBA is avoid self-employment taxes. With this one, sorry folks, we just can't change the color of money. Remember, you and your DBA are one and the same. So therefore, you're still going to file a Schedule C on your taxes, and you're still going to be subject to the self-employment taxes. So those are the things that we cannot do with the DBA. So yeah, a lot of things that we cannot do with the DBA. I know in the back of your mind, and probably in the back of your mind, probably the first thing in your mind right now is, well, what's the point? Right? And that is a good question. So this is the part where I get excited, because this is where the magic happens. So let's go ahead and kind of talk a little bit about the DBA magic. So as I stated earlier, with your DBA, you are legally allowed to operate a business using a separate name from yours, which allows you to test things out. In the world of business, there's something called a feasibility study. And if you've never heard of a feasibility study, I highly encourage and recommend you to look into it, especially for those of you who are serial entrepreneurs. But just kind of let me tell you what it is in summary. A feasibility study is an analysis of a proposed project to determine whether it is feasible and thereby worth moving forward with. This is why I love the DBAs as a viable option for those of you who are just beginning. It allows you to test your ideas, your product, your services, your market. You're allowed to analyze your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. You are allowed to test things out without having to deal with the intricate details of forming an entity like an LLC or an S-Corp and without having to worry about coming up with all this capital that's required to administrate it. Now, please keep in mind, a DBA is not for everyone. And here's what I mean by that. If you are testing things out or if you're testing your service and product and that service or product has the potential to bring harm to anything living, even in the testing stages, you may want to consider actually forming an entity and putting that layer of separation between you and the business. Again, if you are the type of business, so not if you are the type of business, but if you are considering testing something that could potentially harm anything living, the DBA may not be the safest route for you. And at that point, I would suggest you do a little bit more research, look into, like I said, setting up that separate entity so you can definitely, create a layer of separation. Alternatively, if you still want to go the DBA route and you believe your product can harm somebody, make sure that you have some good business insurance with an umbrella policy to help cover things, okay? Again, keep that in mind. Depending on what you have, this may not be the safest route for you, but again, just something to think about. All right, so continuing on with the DBA magic, let's still talk about a few things that you can do with this DBA. Starting with this, you still can open up a separate bank account under your DBA name. As a matter of fact, I highly encourage that you do so, okay? You can receive income into that account under the DBA name. You can pay bills under that account in the DBA name. So make sure that you, if you do a DBA, get you a business account in that DBA's name. And as a side note here, let me just kind of talk about this, because even though you're testing things out, you still may make a profit or two, which is why getting a separate bank account is a good idea. I'm not going to say it's a good idea. It's something you need to do. Why? Because you're still going to have to pay taxes on the income that you make during the testing phases. So having a separate bank account makes you just look that much better in the eyes of the IRS. It helps you identify what came from the business. It helps you identify what you spent in the business, and your tax preparer will love you for it. Trust me, especially if there's going to be losses in those first couple of years, you definitely want to have a separate bank account. All right. So let's move on to the next thing we can do with our DBA. You can get credit. Yes, you can actually apply for credit with vendors, apply for credit with credit card companies, apply for credit with some of these major retail stores under your DBA. But like an example that I said earlier, keep in mind that you and your DBA are one in the same. So any credit that you apply for is going to be a personal guarantee, meaning that it is going to be based off your personal credit score. So keep that in mind, but you still can get the credit. You still can build those relationships. So when it's time to make the switch, it'll be easier to do so. Okay. Another thing you can do with your DBA, hire people. You know, if the testing is going that good where you need to hire people, well, guess what? You can do so under your DBA. Only thing at this point, you're going to have to get you an EIN, which is an employer identification number, because at that point, you're going to become an employer. And even though you wouldn't be able to put yourself on payroll as a DBA, the people you hire will be put on payroll, which means you'll be responsible for payroll taxes. You'll be responsible for everything dealing with payroll. But the fact of the matter is, under a DBA, you still can hire people. But as a side note to that, if the testing is going that well where you have to hire people, well, then maybe it's time to consider switching it from a DBA to something, to another type of entity. Okay, just kind of keep that in mind. And lastly, one of the greatest things you can do when you have a DBA is get creative. And here is one of the things I love most about the DBA is the creativity that it allows, okay? You can set up multiple DBAs, test out multiple things without spending a lot of money. But the creativity really comes in when you are the owner of an LLC or a C-Corp or a trust or something like that, and you want to try to see if what you're doing can fit into a different market. So you take that LLC and you form a DBA, or you take that S Corp and you form a DBA, and you do the same thing as a sole proprietor would. You test things out. And if it makes sense, if it's doing well, then that's when you put it into its own entity. But you can own 1,000 DBAs. It really doesn't matter. You can get creative. If it's not working, then guess what? Just shut it down. It's just that simple. You don't have to go through a lot of litigation, a lot of paperwork, taxes and all that. With DBAs, if it's not working, then you get to shut it down and open it and try it again. You can do different things without spending a lot of money, putting a lot of resources to testing the market. The DBA allows you to do that very inexpensively. But keep in mind, if you are an LLC or C Corp or something of that nature, any type of entity, forming a DBA does not make the main company a holding company. That is something completely separate. That is something completely different. Those two are not the same. You can be an LLC and you could have 100 DBAs open up under you. That does not make that main LLC a holding company. So don't misunderstand that. Keep that in mind. A holding company is something completely separate. Okay. So get creative. Yes, but do not misunderstand and think that you've created a holding company and things are going to be completely different, because they're not. Okay, so now we've talked about DBAs and what you cannot do with them and the magic and the creativity of having one. One of the more logical questions that would come up and say, okay, now that I have my DBA, I've tested things out, it works, I'm ready to make the transition. So the next question to ask is, well, when do I switch? When do I switch from becoming or from being a DBA to becoming an LLC or a C Corp or a different type of entity? And that is a good question. And my answer to that is when it makes sense to. Meaning, one, when you are ready. Only you will know when you are ready. Think about it. You are the one who tested things out. You are the one who saw the results. You saw the numbers. Are you ready to make the change? Did the testing go good? Did you analyze everything? Only you will know when you are ready. Because again, DBAs, you're testing things in your local market. Only you are going to know if it's ready to go into different markets, if you're ready to go across the United States and get there, whether you go online and really make it big, an announcement. Only you will know when you are ready. Also, when you can afford to do so. Make the switch only when you can afford to do so. I've mentioned this so many times that it takes money to actually have a corporation. Yes, you can most likely go out and form an LLC for $1 if you wanted to. But just because you can form it for $1 doesn't mean that you can maintain it for $1. Having a separate entity takes a lot of money to maintain it administratively. According to the laws of that state, requires certain things to be done. There's annual fees associated with it. So Run the numbers. You know me, I'm a fan of run those numbers. When you can afford to move to something different, then you do so. Don't do it just because it's cheap to get it started, because that's the key word. You probably could go out and form an LLC right now for under $50, but just because you formed it, you still have to maintain it. And that's where the problem lies. Not being able to adequately keep capital inside of that structure really deems it pointless. So only make the change when you can afford to. All right, so now we've come to a point where we know all we need to know about an LLC. We know the good, the bad, the ups, the downs, everything, which leaves one last question to answer. And that is, how do you form a DBA? Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. But before we do, I want you to understand something. Okay, first, understand this. The process of forming a DBA varies widely, okay? It is very different for each state, for each county, for each jurisdiction. Varies widely. However, the steps of a DBA are principally the same. The principle is about the same. There are 7 steps or 7 basic foundational principle steps that no matter where you are, no matter which state you're in, which jurisdiction, you're going to need to follow and have ready this information. So let's go ahead and kind of walk through them, beginning with step 1. Choose at least 3 names. And the reason I want you to choose at least 3 names is because I don't want you to be disappointed. Remember, someone else may have the name that you're looking for, but that's okay. Choose 3 names that you are comfortable with before you fill out the application. Because at least with 2 additional names on top of the one that you had your heart set on, you'll be more likely to get a name that you want, okay? So moving on, step 2, conduct a name availability search. So this is a very important step. You want to conduct a name availability search because you want to ensure that there's no one else in your local jurisdiction using the intended name that you want to use. And if you follow step 1, you have 3 names to search for, and I want you to search for all 3 names because you never know. You might just want to register all 3. You might like them all and be like, hey, I'm going to do all 3 of these names. Well, I say go for the gusto. Do it. Step 3. Fill out the application. Now, although the application may vary, again, the process varies widely from state to state, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, market to market. However, there's going to be some basic information needed, or should I say the basic information needed on these applications will be the same, beginning with your name. Obviously, they will need your name as you are the person who will be operating under the new name, okay? So if you're doing this for your business, like if your LLC or C-Corp is the one that is filling out the application, then you're going to put your business name so they'll know who is this individual that's getting ready to do business as in our county, okay? Next thing, under the application, you'll need the DBA name, another obvious one, because this is the name that you've chosen, right? And for most applications, you can only put one of the names that you've chosen. So hopefully you've done the name search, you've confirmed that that name is available, and that's the one you're going to put on the application, okay? Another part of the application is the principal address. Why? Because most likely they will want to know where the principal place of business is going to be. If you operate from your home, then use your home address. If you are an out-of-state corporation or LLC, then list the address where the business is going to be operating within that jurisdiction, not the address as to where the corporation or the LLC is in the home state. They want to know where it's going to be operating at in that particular jurisdiction. Of course, you want to sign and date it. That's what makes it official. So do that there. And then you submit and pay. Nothing is free, fam. I'm just telling you right now. So be prepared to pay the application fee or fees once you have submitted the application. All right. So step 4, publicize it. Depending on the laws and requirements of your particular area, you may need to run an ad in the paper to let people know that this new DBA is now in operation and it is doing business in this particular jurisdiction. For example, here in LA County, every time we do a DBA, we have to publish an ad in a local paper and run it for a minimum of 4 weeks just to let everybody know that, hey, new business is on the scene. Let the public know a new business is on the scene, and we go from there. Step 5, wait. And now this is a very important step. And the reason I say I want you to wait is because, remember, in step 4, we have to publicize it in the paper. I do not want you to, as soon as you publicize it in the paper, go out and start spending all this money buying business cards, getting letterhead, doing all these promotional things. Why? Because what if there was a mistake? What if the county that you registered in didn't realize that there was another business out there with that name and there was a glitch in the system that day, so it allowed you to process that application using that business name? And then when you ran the ad in the paper, the owner was like, hey, I already have that name. And they contact the state, and it's a big old thing, and you end up not being able to get that name. But you've already spent all this money. So please wait. Give people time to look at the publication, to contest it if there's a need be. If everything is clear after it's ran in the paper, then by all means, go out and do everything you need to do to start testing out your market. But make sure that you wait. Next step, open up a separate bank account. So now that you have an official business name and you are legally operating in your local market, please, I am begging you to go out and open up a separate business account. Once you do that, then you're free to do whatever you want to do, but open up that separate bank account because you are going to need it, as I stated before, for tax purposes. And the last step, register and get permits. Again, depending on where you are, there is going to be a wide variety of additional steps that you are going to need to do. One, depending on your business, I guess that should be the most part. Depending on the type of business that you're getting ready to test, you may need to grab a seller's license, a wholesaler's license. You are definitely, I can't say definitely again, depending on where you are, you may be required to get a business license from your city. You may be required to register with other tax departments. There may be a lot of other things that you may need to do, permits that you may need to have, zoning. It could be a whole lot of things. So do me a favor. Do your due diligence. Once you've operated or once you've established your business and it's yours to do with, do your due diligence. Make sure that you check with all your local county and other government agencies and just, hey, this is the type of business that I'm doing. What other permits do I need to ensure that I'm operating in full legal capacity? You don't want no hiccups. You don't want anything coming back to bite you in the behind in the end. Get the business permits and licenses that it needs, and you'll be good to go. And that's all, folks. Nope, you won't get the Porky Pig. That's all, folks, for me because I just can't do it. I tried it all my life. But that is it. I really, truly appreciate you being here. And as always, man, you know your Uncle Cousin. I love you. I appreciate you being here, watching this video. If you have any questions, always make sure that you leave a comment below. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell next to it so you can get notified when I post videos, because now that I'm free again, tax season is over, I got a lot more coming your way. And as always, if you need me, make sure to hit me up on any one of these social media channels here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.